Hello and welcome to part 3 of the series, and that's painting, which is the bit you all wanted to do in the first place. Now from this point on, cleanliness and keeping the dust down become really quite important. So we're going to have a clean environment to work in and keep wiping everything down with the panel wipe. And what you'll see, it kind of never ceases to amaze me just how much rubbish comes off a panel even when you think it's clean. And also with a tack rag, as you'll see in a minute. So in this video I'm going to be showing you what the process is to use both spray cans and spray gun. So I'm going to show you with some spray cans, which you can achieve a good finish with spray cans if you follow all these sort of steps that we go through in these videos. Now quite a while ago I bought this awful 87 2CV that was in a right state, and I restored it completely. You're just using cans. As you can see, the sort of finish you can actually get with cans. I used 7 tins in total, and it turned out okay with a lot of effort and work. In this particular instance we're going to use some rust converter. I've only used this once before. Here's a top tip when using cans is put them in some warm water first, so it's really quite a nice warm bowl of water there, and get them warming up. Also what we're going to need is a mask. Now this is the mask I use specifically for 2-pack paints, and you can see it's one of the top ones that 3M do. They're quite expensive, the canisters. Now I'm using the rust converter here. Now this particular process I felt like I had to do because there's just so many sort of rust worms still in the paint on the panel, and you can see the strange effect it has where it actually bonds to the surface and turns the metal black as it protects makes a protective surface on the panel itself ready for painting on top. I really would recommend you not do this because it's an absolute pig to work with, and it takes days to dry and sand down again. And we're going to be putting some high build primer on. This is high build primer here that I'm using with my spray gun. As always, cleanliness really important, and getting the panel completely clean, ready for the first coat of paint, which is going to be primer. Now you can get high build primer in spray cans, which if you want to use spray cans then you can. In this instance I'm using a spray gun. It goes on like glue and it's very thick, and you can see the actual spray that comes out of the nozzle is actually quite narrow, so you end up doing sort of strips. What you want to do is completely cover the panel so it's an even depth. Now your pre-warmed cans, this is how you use them. You have to give them a jolly good shake for at least 2 minutes. Test spray off the panel first to begin with, and then you want nice gentle strokes all the way across at a set distance and at a set rate to build up very even layers of paint as you go across. So I'm showing you spray cans, but I will be using a spray gun as well. So even light coats as you build up. And that's the key to spraying with cans, is lots and lots of light even coats and time between them. What we're doing here is putting on a guide coat, what's called a guide coat. It doesn't really matter what colour it is, but black is the most useful colour to use normally. What the idea of this is you just do a faint dusting of guide coat over the top, so when we sand down now through the high build primer you can see where you've been. Now I always use a little bits of fairy liquid in the water, a little tiny dab of fairy liquid in the water, and it seems to help the job. And this is 600 grade grip paper, and sanding down flat as always with the sanding block, rubber block. So you just want to sand through the black so the grey is shown through. Now we see it, this is where I did the welding previously on this section here. You can see there's a little tiny bit of distortion in the panel there where you can see where that grey is there, the black is I mean, that's low spot, so that's going to need a little bit of remedial action, which we're going to do in a second. So keep going all over the panel, 600 grit throughout, and some edges obviously you can't do with the flat block sander, so wrap the paper around your finger and work in the little grooves and areas where you can't get to with the block sander until all of the top guide coat is sanded off and you know that you've sanded the whole panel flat. Now this is what we're going to use, a finissage or one component filler, or 1K filler if you like. Just comes straight out of a tube. You can only spread this stuff really thin, because if you do it on thick it just never dries. Now for some reason there's a little dig there in the panel, and I'm going to have to use a little bit of finissage over the top to fill that in. So very thin, tiny thin skim. And same here on this section here, where we can just fill a little bit where the imperfections are. And this stuff dries, but it does take quite a while, so I always leave it overnight to sand it down again. This is 800 grit paper. And we just work it ever so gently, because we don't want to take off anything around it. We really just want to take off the finissage that we've put on, or the 1K filler, whatever you want to call it. Now that's perfectly smooth and filled in the tiny little dig that was there. Same with this area here. Working it round very gently and shaping to make that disappear completely in the finished job. Okay, on to spray guns. Now if you are going to use a spray gun, I'll use a little tiny one like this. It's not a great big one. And this is how it works basically. That's where the air comes in, and you can adjust how much air is coming through there, the pressure. This is the business end. It's a 0.8mm spray gun. Those little tiny holes are what creates the fan, and the little tiny hole in the centre there that you can see is a needle that moves back, and that's where the paint actually comes out. That adjusts where the needle's position is, so how much air comes out according to the trigger position. And this fan spray adjust here is how big or how small the fan spray ends up being by mixing either the centre air or the air that comes through the tiny holes, and that's where the paint goes. Now we need to keep the place warm. There's no use spraying in below about 10 degrees centigrade, because it's just not going to work. So nice and warm in the garage, 20 degrees centigrade is a good temperature to be painting at. Here's the paint we're using, Citroen Blue Lagoon, and that's the 2K hardener, which I'm going to use with this paint. That's the poisonous stuff. And there's some 2K thinners as well, slow acting. So between the three of these, it's going to do the job. Here's my cheapy compressor, my £100 compressor there, Aldi special, and we want the pressure down a little bit. So the gun is rated at only 40 psi, so we just want to take it down until we get something like that sort of level. Now here's a top tip: get yourself a piece of metal and shape it like this, and not only is it a brilliant stirring stick for the bottom of your tin, it also works as a colour chart, because you keep this even when the tins run out, and that is a perfect colour match to the paint that you've painted before, and a good body shop would be able to match that very well. Now we're getting to actually painting the top coat on now, so meticulous clean of the panel throughout, trying to get every last little tiny bit of rubbish off, and it always never ceases to amaze me just how much crap comes off a panel even when you think it's clean. And this is a tack rag which you can buy pre-packaged, where you can just rip the package open and use them and throw them away. And this is just to take all the last little tiny bits of dust off or anything, and make sure that the panel is completely dry before you start spraying. There we are, you see, amazing how much comes off even just with the wipe over. Now the paint itself, when you do 2-pack, is pretty thick, and there's about 250ml of paint there, which, believe it or not, will be enough to paint a bonnet. That's the paint, well mixed, and you want it's 2 to 1, so you want 1 part 2K hardener to 2 parts of paint. I'm having to use a little stick there, one of my mixing sticks, because I'd run out of measuring cups that have the markings at the side. So a quick mix of the ingredients there, and just see how thick it is. You see the hardener does actually thin it down quite a lot. You need to mask on. I forgot to mention, wear your mask whenever you're touching anything to do with the 2K hardener, because that is the cyanacrylate, whatever it's called. It's really nasty, dangerous stuff. So a little dash of thinners in there, and then a proper mix. I've speeded this bit up, but you really want to mix this for a minute or two to make sure it's totally mixed. What we're aiming for is like a consistency of milk, really, where within a couple of seconds it stops dripping off the mixer like that. So it just goes into drops, and then it will go through the gun really well. Right, here we go, starting with the spraying. Always spray off the panel first to begin with to check your spray pattern. Now this first coat is the number of coats is the number up in the corner. This first coat is what I call a dry coat, where you really just missed over the top of the panel. Going quite slowly, as you can see, at a fair distance away, just trying to get an absolutely even coating all over of paint. It doesn't matter if it's slightly translucent. The idea of this coat is to bond the other coats on. So a very light coat to begin with, just evenly all over everything. Around the front there. Always leave about 5 minutes in between the coats as well. Now, when you're spraying with cellulose spray cans, you need to leave longer between the coats because it doesn't bond on quite how 2-pack paint does. So leave longer between the coats, and needless to say, leave the room while it's drying off. I've got the windows and the door open as well, by the way, and of course the mask on, because this is very poisonous. That funny noise you can hear is my compressor. So that's coat number 2 going on. Even as much as you can all over everything. Little spray off the panel there, and then this is the little vent panel piece that I'm spraying as well. Now, to stop what's called tiger striping, which is where you get some faint sort of bands in the paint of thickness, I go every other coat, or whenever, I go side to side instead of up and down. So like a crosshatch pattern, to make sure that you're completely coated everywhere. So this is coat number 4 going on. Because it's a little spray gun, it's only got a little pot on it, and you have to stop and fill it up every now and then to make sure you don't run out. And here we go, coat number 5. Again, going across instead of up and down, just to try and keep it as even as possible. Already the finish is starting to come now, but you don't want runs and drips, so you just have to be very even and gentle with how much actually you put on. It looks like I'm doing loads and loads of spraying. As like I say, there's 5 minutes in between. With 2-pack paint, 5 minutes in between each coat. So this is coat number 6. With cellulose paint that you get in cans, you'd probably have to do even more coats than that, and probably leave 10 minutes or 15 minutes between the coats just to build it up, because they end up being very thin. And in this particular instance, I did 7 coats of paint, and I've slowed it down for this last section, so this is real speed. And this is what I call a wet coat. So we did a dry coat to begin with, if you like. Now this coat, after leaving it about 10 minutes, you really put it on as thick as you dare, really. Nothing changes in the spray gun, nothing changes in the paint itself. It's just the speed you go across the panel. You see I'm going quite slowly there, so you're actually putting slightly more paint on than you were before. So you want a wet coat to flat out everything underneath it on the last pass. And this is the finished job. Now, it's not completely finished because this is just what's called spray gun finish, which is just what comes out the spray gun. It's not bad. There's no drips or runs or anything, so I'm happy about that. There's always, whenever I paint, no matter how careful you are, there's always some little tiny little flecks of dust which you can just see there, if you got the resolution on the video that you're watching. But pretty good. It's well coated and ready for the next process, which will be knocking the top off it and flatten it and polishing it. That's the corner that we welded, looking pretty good. I think by the time I finished, I don't think anybody would be able to tell that was ever repaired before, and very pleased in general. Now this will take a good day or two to dry really properly before I start handling the panel again and be ready for the next process, which will be knocking the top off and polishing it. But pretty good. All right so far. And that's it for this video. So join us next time where we're going to put the panel on the car and knock the tops off and polish it up. Okay, see you then.